Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 207th episode of the Simple Sophisticate. Today's episode is going to focus on the yard and garden, but don't worry if you're not someone that would describe themselves as having a green thumb, or even if you do have a green thumb, but your garden is in this vast, plentiful, bucolic grounds that is just something you would dream about if we're thinking about Monet, for example. This is the episode for you because I find myself in that same boat where I love looking at all these amazing gardens and I can see all these different ideas in front of me, but it's a matter of time, money, where I live, and so many other things that I'm trying to figure out what is it that I can bring into my life, because I know having a garden and having a yard that's healthy and green or florally beautiful is something that definitely helps my spirit, but I need to figure out how to welcome that into my life without it becoming my life, because I do know that it takes an immense amount of effort and time to create those visions we see in magazine and on television. So that's what we're going to talk about today in a general sense. But before I get into that, I have a book that was recently released and I have been enjoying it, and I want to share it with you so you could enjoy it as well. It is nonfiction, but it is more history and insight into how famous names that we know came to be. I think if you are someone who likes to travel, if you're someone who likes food, I think you're going to enjoy this book. So I'll talk about that at the end of today's episode. But let's get to the topic of today's focus, titled Welcoming the Gifts of a Garden and Yard When the Yard is Small or the Time is Short. Now, we're going to look at 11 different things any one of us can do to cultivate a yard or garden that in even just the smallest of ways can add or enhance the quality of our lives. But I want to begin with a quote by Marcus Cicero. He states, "If you have a garden and a library, you have everything you need." And isn't that true? He doesn't specify the size of the garden. He doesn't specify how many books, but just those two concepts, right? Mother Nature and knowledge. Mother Nature and knowledge. Those are two amazing riches to have in our lives. So that's the focus I want to kind of take into our discussion today. Beginning with, as we dream about Claude Monet's gardens at Giverny or Bouchard Gardens near Victoria, Canada, or the grounds of Versailles in France. Each of these and many more outdoor masterpieces which utilize the gifts of Mother Nature to enchant visitors are as glorious as they are intimidating to those of us who are curious to welcome similar beauty onto our own properties and sanctuaries. Now, my own experience and my own background with gardening began with my mom. Now, I grew up with a mother who has a sincere love for gardening and whose canvas is more than a few acres. And every summer, and beginning in spring, obviously, and ending in fall, but in the summer, the peak season, I watched as she painstakingly watered by hand all of her flower beds, all of her raised garden boxes for years until my parents installed automatic sprinklers. During the winter months, she still goes through the garden catalogs and plants seeds far in advance of the spring season and nurses them in her sunroom and then in her greenhouse before planting them in their final destination in the yard or garden. So I've been watching this my entire childhood and throughout obviously my adulthood as I go back and visit my parents. I know how much effort goes in. From an outsider's perspective, I probably have no concept literally of the effort, as only she would know that. Needless to say, The effort master gardeners put into their plants and flowers and landscapes can easily be a full-time job. And while many of us may want and appreciate sincerely the gifts that spending time around such natural beauty brings into our lives, we may not all either have the space, the property, or the ability, due to renting, or the time or devoted passion to do so. I find myself in a little bit of both of the camps, or many of the camps that I just mentioned, for my reasons of not having a bountiful garden and yard. While in my previous home, of which I owned for 9 years, I invested much money into installing automatic sprinklers, planting new trees, installing a cedar fence, along with the seasonal attention that is required each year. Part of me, upon moving to Bend, was a little bit, more than a little bit, relieved to not have to rake 40 bags of leaves, even though I loved my maple trees. And because I'm renting, I didn't have to worry about investing in a landscape architect to mold my yard into an oasis. Now, I would have wanted to do that, and I will do that when I get a house, and that's the thing. I wouldn't have been tempted to do it. I'm not tempted to do it right now because it's not my house. Now, on the flip side, I know that I derive great pleasure from being outdoors and enjoying the vegetables and herbs and sometimes fruit from my garden, as well as arriving home to a bevy of daffodils in the spring, lavender in the summer, and lush hostas tucked into the shade in my flower beds surrounding my front porch. Mother Nature is an elixir, a form of comfort and a destination to unwind, relax, and appreciate the natural beauty that can surround us should we choose to welcome it into our lives. And so I've been trying to find that balance. And for the last 3 years, while I'm doing less, I'm still doing something every single year with my yard. And making sure that I do have that outdoor space and it is a welcoming outdoor environment around my house for guests. So today I wanted to share with you how you too can welcome the gifts of a yard and garden into your life without being someone who has the master gardener credentials or even wants them. Rather, by adopting a few or all of these ideas shared today, there'll be 11 of them, you can cultivate the simple yet powerful gifts a thoughtful approach to tending to your garden and yard can bring. So let's get into this. Number 1, keep it simple. As with other areas of our lives, keeping what is necessary and valued and letting go of what is not enables simplicity to be the guiding principle. Even if we are in awe of our neighbor's yard, our space, time, and budget may and probably will be different. Taking an approach to welcoming more color and fresh plants, as well as a gardening space, must work for you. So take a look at what your space and time allow. Each spring, for example, I know that I'll be planting 5 pots, looking for 1 hanging basket, and planting my garden, which is 4 feet by 8 feet. So not that big. And make sure that you enjoy the process of enriching what you have and celebrating rather than comparing what you cultivate on your home ground to those around you. Now, I will share with you that on today's show notes, I've taken a few pictures of my hostas, of my potted plant, my pots, and of my Japanese maple, I had 2 Japanese maples out front of my house. I've taken a picture of those 2. It's not a picture of my house out of privacy, but I have taken pictures of the plants. So you can get an idea of the colors that I choose and the combinations that I choose, just to give you, if nothing else, some inspiration of how easy and simple it can be. So that's number 1, keep it simple. Number 2, find your hardiness zone. Now, what do I mean by hardiness? My gardeners out there know exactly what I'm talking about. When I say hardiness, it's with regards to the temperatures and which plants will survive or thrive in your area where you live, your zip code. Now, depending on where you live, you will have more success with some plants than others. For example, as my followers on Instagram know, I am a huge fan of hydrangeas, but I have never had luck growing them either in my previous home or here in Bend. It's just too cold or too dry. It just does not work out. So while yes, I would love to have them, and there are some hardier versions that I have attempted. The classic hydrangeas with those huge mop heads are not something that at the moment I have the opportunity to grow. Therefore, I'm not going to invest in them because they are perennial and they are expensive and they're worth it if you can grow them and take care of them properly, but they're not if you can't. So, if you live in the States, I've provided a link to a website that will help you figure out what the zone is for where you live. You just type in your zip code. I've also included a similar website for Canada and the United Kingdom. If you live in any other country, simply type in your hardiness zone and your country, literally the word hardiness zone and the name of your country in quotes. Probably don't even have to put quotes. And you'll probably find a similar website to the three that I've listed on today's show notes, so you can check those out. That's key because that's going to tell you what you should look for. Number 3, with regards to what you should look for, shop smart, meaning when should you shop and what should you shop for? Now that you know what types of plants to buy, and this is the good news, most nurseries in your area will probably primarily sell plants that would thrive in the environment in which you live. Keep in mind that shopping early in the nursery season, so in spring, now every region again is going to be different. You may have warm weather year round, so that's going to change things entirely. But you know your nurseries, and if you don't, seek them out and ask people who have beautiful yards or neighbors that go to and work in their garden. Ask them for recommendations. I've done that a few times when I first moved to Bend. But you want to go early in the season for best selection. Now, as I shared a few weeks ago on Instagram, when my favorite local nursery opened its doors for the first time of the season, I made sure my list of annual plants were ready based on what I needed, and then I stopped by within the first 48 hours of them being opened. Now, keep in mind, shopping early is the key for those particular items that you are going to want that often sell out quickly and are not restocked. So, for example, I enjoy creeping jennies, and I'll talk more about what those are a little bit later, but I do have a link so you can check them out on the show notes. They tend to be, for whatever reason, hard to find later in spring. They're very popular. And flowering bulbs such as dahlias and cannas and lilies can be planted in spring as well, so those might go fairly quickly. But other plants or bulbs that will not become available until, for example, late summer and fall, such as daffodils, as you plant the bulb in the fall, they won't probably be even in stock until later in the year. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Now, I've included a link to the Ultimate Flower Calendar, which will let you know which flowers to shop for and when to plant them. That is on the show notes. So that's number 3. Shop smart, when and what. All right, number 4. Grow an herb garden or herb garden. No matter how big or small, or even whether you have outdoor space or not, you can always have an herb garden, and I highly recommend that you do. Especially if you are someone who enjoys cooking, you will be saving yourself a decent chunk of change by having, for example, a basil plant, which will only cost you about $3 to $5 if you're buying a seedling that's just barely, 2-3 inches tall and letting it grow, versus paying $4 to $5 every single time you need fresh basil leaves at the grocery store. So much money can be saved. And that's the same with all the herbs that you could potentially grow in your garden. In 2013, I wrote a detailed post on how to create your own mini garden, and part of the mini garden details having an herb garden as well as the herbs to include. So be sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in. If you do plant an herb garden outside, some of your herbs will not need to be replanted the next year. For example, sage, rosemary, flatleaf parsley, and even oregano have demonstrated in my own garden to be quite hardy and be growing well the next year. So that's number 4, grow an herb garden. Number 5, how to pot a pot. The basics that work. So there are 3 components to determining which plants to put in your outdoor pots. Whether they will be in the sunshine or in the shade is something you want to note, to be aware of. This would apply to hanging baskets as well, but as you will see in one of my pictures with my hanging baskets, I keep it very simple and I just buy one that has one plant, a fuchsia, that's good for the shade, and it's just one plant or many plants of fuchsia, so it's very monochromatic. But when it comes to actual pots that are on the ground, on my porch, things like that, I stick to this 3-component rule, which my mom taught me, and Paul Allen Smith reiterates, and I'm sure she learned from somebody too. But it's easy to remember. It's called the thriller, the filler, and the spiller. What? Let me explain. So the thriller is the tall plant, the one for height that's going to be either in the middle of the pot or depending on where your pot is placed, if it's against a wall or a railing or something like that. You're probably going to put the height in the back of the pot. And then you add the filler. So those will be plants that don't drape or are really tall. They literally fill the pot. And then you have the spiller, which is doing just what it sounds like. It's spilling over the side of the pot. So you have those 3 levels. And those are really the 3 plants you want to look for. That makes it simple. Look for your color combination. Look for the type of weather that they need. If they're going to be in shade, make sure they can all handle shade. If they're all going to be on the sun, make sure they can all handle that intense heat. Now, I do include a link for a post written by Paul Allen Smith titled Successfully Growing Plants in Containers, and he details everything that you're going to need to know on that blog post. So be sure to take a look at that. All right, so let me share with you one approach that I take with my particular pots. Now, I have a porch that is primarily in the shade, in the front porch. My back porch is out in the sun. And so what I tend to stick to is my thriller is a hosta plant. And I'll explain to you why I choose that in a second. But it is the tallest plant that's going to be in that pot. And then I choose coleus, which is a beautiful annual plant with all different types of colors and combinations. And it also likes to be in partial shade. And the last one that I add for the spiller is the sweet potato vine. Now, the sweet potato vine comes in a couple different colors, but it is very delicate, so you don't want to put that out until you know the last frost has passed. I actually picked up a bunch of sweet potato vines when I went shopping a few weeks ago, but I did not pot it for a few weeks and kept it inside because we were still having some chilly nights. So that's just an example of one of my pots using that 3-component approach. Now, my gardeners out there may be saying, hey, Shannon, hostas are not annuals, and you are correct. What I love to do, and I was giving this idea by my mom, is why not pot hostas in your pots for the first summer, and then as you go into fall, pot them in the ground to grow your perennial flower beds and garden beds. And I do that. So every year I'm adding 2 or more new hostas to the ground. And so they do basically 2 things for me. They do something for me in the summer, and then they continue to grow and get bigger every single year in the ground. So that's number 5. Now, before I get into the remaining 6 ways you can welcome the benefits of having a yard and garden into your everyday life, I'd like to introduce you to today's sponsor. The Simple Sophisticate is sponsored this week by Casper Mattresses. As someone who protects my 8 hours of sleep each night as absolutely necessary for a productive next day, the mattress we sleep on each night is an important decision as well. The original Casper mattress combines multiple supportive memory foams for a quality sleep surface with the right amounts of both sink and bounce. Its breathable design helps you sleep cool and regulates your body temperature throughout the night. With over 2,000 reviews and an average of 4.8 stars across Casper, Amazon, and Google, Casper is becoming the internet's favorite mattress, and all of Casper mattresses are designed, developed, and assembled in the United States. Available at affordable prices because Casper cuts out the middleman and sells directly to you, your mattress will be delivered right to your door in a small, how do they do that, sized box. Enjoy free shipping and returns in the U.S. and Canada. As listeners of the Simple Sophisticate podcast, you will get $50 towards your select mattress by visiting casper.com/SS and entering the promo code SS. Note, this offer is only applicable to select mattress purchases and terms and conditions do apply. You can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free sleep on it trial. Visit casper.com/SS and enter the promo code SS. All right, welcome back. Let's get right back into our list. Number 6, add a few perennials to your yard each year. Perennials can be expensive, but part of the reason their price tag is higher is they last for more than one season, thus the name. Whether it is a shrub, a hedge, the bulbs are for tulips or daffodils and roses, or anything you determine would complement your yard and survive in your climate, gradually bring a few more into your yard as your budget allows. Take time when making decisions about perennials because they are going to be there for many years and you want to make sure that they're going to thrive wherever you put them. So what I've done in the past is I pay attention to, during the summer months, where the shade and the sun fall, how much is that area of the yard or whatever going to get a bunch of sun, shade, and so thus I need to make sure I get a plant that would be an ideal condition for it. So that's number 6. Add a few perennials to your yard each year. Number 7, follow an expert or a few who offers ample inspiration and information. The Simply Luxurious Life blog and the Simple Sophisticate podcast, they're not gardening sources. I know that. You guys know this. But I am regularly encouraging time spent with nature as a means for a more content life. If I can do anything to assist you in your journey to welcome more Mother Nature into your home, it is to offer the encouragement to indeed do this, welcome her with open arms. There are many fantastic gardening blogs available to read and follow. Some offer expert advice. As I mentioned, Paul Allen Smith is my trusted go-to. Some are just wonderful sites for visual inspiration. So one place that I love, and I follow her regularly for all sorts of reasons, but Sharon Santoni's home in northern France is just stunning. And she does share what she does and how it works and why. Recently, she wrote a post about wisteria. So if you're someone who is curious about wisteria, she has obviously pictures of her own wisteria covering her country home, but she walks you through how and the benefits and the drawbacks and all that. And then some offer both of those, the expertise and visuals, but they also have the opportunity for customers to purchase the flowers they grow, such as Floret's Flowers from Washington. Her dahlias are her rock star product, but her daffodils are amazing as well. There's so many other things that she sells. So I've included links to all 3 of those sites on the show notes, but I think just following someone that you trust, getting ideas and inspiration, but also coming to the table with the knowledge of where you live and what you're looking for. So that's number 7. Number 8, basic concept, but something to always keep in mind: water regularly. As with anything we want to grow, regular watering is a must. Now, for those of us who travel, which is myself, and I know many of you do as well, this can become difficult as we want to travel during the summer, but we also have invested some money in our plants and we want to return home to a place that has living, blooming flowers. So just keep that in mind when you purchase how many plants you want to purchase, because while it's not taking care of a pet or a child, it is still something that you care about. And it's as simple as asking your neighbor, hey, could you water my plants once, maybe every other day? And then when you return, giving them a thank you gift of some sort. Or move your pots, I've done this before, so that while you're traveling, they actually get watered by the automatic sprinkler system so you don't have to hire anyone. They may not look appropriate where you've put them, but it gets watered, and when you return home, you can put them back to where they're supposed to be. So that's number 8. Number 9, use good soil. Quality matters as well when it comes to gardening. This year, I purchased a yard of organic soil builder compost from our local county recycling business, and I only had to pay $15. Now, I also had to pay for them to deliver it because I don't have a pickup, but I wanted to give my garden an extra rich, nutritious foundation that was organic. You can also buy something similar in bags at your local nursery, but price per pound, this was an amazing deal, and I did not want to pass it up. Now, when I had to wheelbarrow it to the backyard and to my garden, I got a great workout that day, and I did not do my strength workout because it was exhausting. But my garden, I'm excited to see how it will grow this year because of it. So back to this concept of making sure we have good soil. Feeding our soil for our garden and ensuring it is of good quality is the key to building a successful garden. There are other ways you can tend to your soil organically besides just adding compost. Better Homes and Gardens shares that you can add shredded leaves. You can add animal manure, which is what my compost actually had, was animal manure in it as well. And they share a bunch of other details about creating a fertile place for your garden to grow very well. I'll include that link on today's show notes. So that's number 9. Use good soil. Number 10, make a plan and map it out. Whether it is planning for which plants to put in your pots or how your landscaping will look or the layout for your garden, which vegetables and fruits will go where, plan it out first. Better Homes and Gardens offers a garden planner. It's a digital planner you can go through for free, and I have a link to it on the show notes. And it's simple and easy to use, but you can also just simply pencil it out on a pad of paper. I find myself sometimes overbuying one plant and then not purchasing enough of another, only having to make a second trip to the nursery, which is never a bad thing. I always love going there, but it would be nice to simplify the process and just have to go once. So planning does make a big difference, and I have made fewer extra trips as the years have gone on. So that's number 10. Last but not least, so maybe you've heard this entire list and you're thinking, this sounds great. I don't have time, or I don't have the space, or maybe I don't have that much money to do all these things. And that's completely understandable, and it depends on where you are in your life as well. So number 11 is for everybody, but especially those who everything else just doesn't make it feasible. Visit your local farmer's market. Whether you have a garden or not, flowers or not, an outdoor herb garden or not, knowing you can always slip away to your local farmer's market to pick up fresh produce, a beautiful seasonal bouquet of flowers for the home, and perhaps a potted basil plant for the windowsill is a perfect way to soak in Mother Nature's gifts and welcome them into your home. You may be wondering, wait a second, I can buy a potted basil plant at the farmer's market? Well, yeah, often nurseries come and they sell their potted plants. So you can have access to nurseries without having to go to the nurseries once the season kicks into high gear. So it just depends on your farmer's market. When we take the time to savor the seasonal bounty, having pulled the carrot from the soil, plucked the fresh strawberry from the vine, or picked the apples from the tree, we are respecting what Mother Nature has provided and tending to our health and well-being along the way. I hope you have discovered a few tips and ideas for beginning or enhancing your home garden and yard experience. For me, having an outdoor space, no matter how small, has always been soothing and necessary to find the balance of my days. I can remember when I, for a very short time, rented an apartment in Portland. This was about 5 years ago. And one of the hardest things was not having an outdoor to go right into the outdoor space, to be able to soak up the sun, to have that idea. They did have a community garden, which is another great option to get involved with if you can. And I did participate in that, and I did plant my tomatoes in that. But I also learned that this is something that was necessary for me when it comes to my sanctuary, to have nature, Mother Nature, as accessible as possible. For me, foundationally, an outdoor space is necessary to find the balance for my days. Even if it's in the winter, just being able to step outside and take in, the sights of my yard with the trees in it, whatever it is, the snow falling on it, the rain falling on it, whatever. For me, that brings a lot of peace. However, initially, all the decisions made available when I was just beginning to be a gardener, just beginning to be someone who got her hands dirty in the dirt for my own houses, I would walk into these nurseries and I would just be overwhelmed with all the beauty and choices, and it was awesome and fantastic. And I did overspend a few times in the beginning because I didn't really know what I could grow and what I shouldn't grow and what should stay there and have someone else enjoy it and what should come home with me. And while I still delight in visiting the nurseries, it's a big deal, that first nursery visit of the year for me, I more clearly trust my decision making and enjoy this experience knowing that when I come home with what I have found, my space will become more welcoming and more of a sanctuary than it already is, all the while saving my budget because I've bought what I needed and what I know I could afford. All right, so I'll provide all of those links on today's show notes at simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 207. And I've also included a few similar posts and episodes that you might enjoy. That detailed post on how to create a mini garden, how to navigate a farmer's market. I did a detailed post on that last year, so you might want to check that out. If you haven't seen the pilot episode of the Simply Luxurious Kitchen seasonal fair to elevate the everyday, be sure to check it out. Our first season is going to kick off in September, on September 8th. So I'm so excited to share that with you. And there's a few other posts that you might want to check out for inspiration. All right, I will be right back with this week's Petit Plaisir. Welcome back. This week's Petit Plaisir is a book that was just recently released. It's titled Ritz and Escoffier, and it focuses on Caesar Ritz and Auguste Escoffier. And it starts in 1889. And it starts in London, but as we know, the history takes them both eventually to Paris. And if you love history, and if you love this concept of these iconic names that we now just mention, here, there, and everywhere without even thinking about how it all began, especially with regards to the details and this, for example, Ritz was 39 when this journey into London began. He wasn't that old, and how ready London was for this. But then scandal ensues, and they hop the channel and they go to Paris, and the Hotel Ritz is launched in Paris. And there's details about the food and the appetizers, and the menus, the decor. Your visual senses are going to be catered to in this book. The book is by Luc Barr, and that name may sound familiar to you because he wrote, his only other book was Provence, 1970, and it focused on MFK Fisher, Julia Child, James Beard, and the reinvention of American taste. So we have a writer who is an expert in the French culinary history, and he then dives into one of the most well-known names in French cuisine, Escoffier, and just to get that behind-the-scenes story, I think is fascinating. Lately, that's the type of books I've been reading. I don't know what has piqued that, but it's great bedtime reading because it takes you back. Your senses are heightened. At the same time, you get to learn about where things that we love come from. So the book again is called Ritz and Escoffier, the Hotelier, the Chef, and the Rise of the Leisure Class by Luc Barr. And you can find a link to the book on the show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 207. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast where I'll recommend a book, a film, or a recipe. Anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Now, before we wrap up today, just a reminder that if you have a question for me that you would like to have answered on the upcoming Ask Shannon episode, the annual Ask Shannon episode, email me at askshannon@thesimplyluxuriouslife.com. Anything that the Simply Luxurious Life is all about, I will answer it on Monday, June 25th, episode 214. Get your question to me by Tuesday, June 12th, and I look forward to answering your questions on the air. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide, now available in paperback as well as ebook and audio versions, which are available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. And to receive exclusive news as well as an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart your weekend, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or a morning cup of coffee. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée.